Egypt attempting to subjugate Israel in the book of Exodus. That's why they came. That's why they made an exodus out of Egypt, because Egypt had turned them into slaves. And as you read forward in the Old Testament, you find that Assyria took advantage of them, Babylon, then the Persian Empire, then the Grecian Empire, and in the four Gospels you see Israel subjugated by Rome. And Rome, and there is a future, what's called a revised Roman Empire that is coming during the 7-year tribulation. So those are the 7 nations throughout time, one of them still future, that have attempted to subjugate Israel. Now, when you look at when Daniel lived during the Babylonian time. So when he gave his prophecies, they were forward-looking. In his prophecies, he doesn't mention Egypt and Assyria because they're history to him. And so he's standing at the time of the Babylonian Empire, and he's prophesying looking forward. So we see then in his prophecies, we don't see anything about Egypt or Assyria because that's history to him. In addition, when he prophesies looking forward, he sees the Roman Empire, which is the fourth head indicated here. But from Daniel's perspective, he can't tell the difference between the Roman Empire as it stood in the days of Jesus Christ and the revised Roman Empire, which will be empowered during the time of the Antichrist. When Daniel saw it, he saw it all as one thing. He didn't see that there was some 2,000 years in between it. So let's take a look at Daniel's prophecies then. And we'll just begin with verse 3 of Daniel chapter 7. And I won't go into all the details of this prophecy. I just want to give you a sense of what is there. Verse 3 of chapter 7 says, Daniel spake and said, I saw in my vision by night, and behold, the 4 winds of the heavens strove upon the great sea. And 4 great beasts came up from the sea, diverse one from another. Now, if you will remember several sessions ago, we saw that the Lord, one angel called to the other angels and said, hold back the 4 winds. Do you remember that? It was saying, hold back the winds of God's persecution. There's 4 of them. Daniel is seeing this after they release the winds of God's judgment, because he says the 4 winds of heaven strove upon the great sea. So these winds of God's judgment are already blowing when Daniel begins his prophecy. And he says, I saw 4 great beasts come up from the sea, diverse one from another. The first was like a lion and had an eagle's wings. And I beheld till the wings thereof were plucked, and it was lifted from the earth and may stand upon his feet as a man, and a man's heart was given to it. Now, of course, this is again the time of the Babylonian Empire, and this lion that Daniel is seeing represents the Babylonian Empire. He says that I beheld till the wings thereof were plucked, and it was lifted up from the earth. The wings being plucked, if you remember, when you read about the Babylonian Empire, the king there was Nebuchadnezzar. And you'll remember that he came out with great pomp and said, this great Babylon that I have created with my own hands, and God smote him with 7 years of insanity. His wings were plucked. And he lived like a beast of the field for 7 years, till his hair grew out like feathers and his fingernails like claws. And after 7 years, he was lifted up from the earth and made to stand on his feet as a man, meaning his lowly position of judgment that God had put him in for 7 years. God lifted him up from that position of judgment, allowed his sanity to come back into him, and a man's heart was given to it. Now, what makes this kind of difficult in the whole book of Revelation is that when we look at it, we're not looking at it from man's perspective. We're looking at it from heaven's perspective. We're seeing it the way that heaven is seeing it. So this first beast that he sees, represented as a lion, represents the Babylonian Empire. Daniel goes on and says, and behold another beast, a second like to a bear, and it raised up itself on one side, and it had 3 ribs in its mouth, in the mouth of it, and between the teeth of it. And they said thus unto it, arise, devour much flesh. The bear represents the Medo-Persian Empire. The Medes and the Persians came together, consolidated their power, and it's called the Medo-Persian Empire. It's referenced as a bear because of its savage brutality. And as well, the three ribs in its mouth, just its cruelty, its savagery, and its brutality. But it says it was raised up on one side because ultimately the Persians were stronger than the Medes. And so it ended up the Persians took over the whole empire. But that's what it means. It raised up on one side. The Persians were stronger and outpowered the Medes. And they had three ribs in the mouth of it, between the teeth of it, just speaks to its utter brutality. And said thus unto it, rise and devour much flesh. After this I beheld, and lo, another like a leopard, which had upon the back of it 4 wings of a fowl, and the beast had also 4 heads, and dominion was given to it. Daniel here is seeing the Grecian Empire. The Grecian Empire was it was spearheaded by Alexander the Great. You remember him from the history books. It says it was like a leopard, which had upon the back of it 4 wings like a fowl. The wings speak of the speed at which Alexander the Great was able to conquer the known world of that day. He was a young man, not yet 40, but he had conquered the entire world of that day in 10 years. In 10 years. And the reason that he was able to do it, commentators believe, is because this mighty fallen angel behind the veil was helping him to accomplish these feats, to take dominion over the known world of that day in simply 10 years. The swiftness with which he was able to accomplish that is represented by the 4 wings of the fowl on his back. And it says, and the beast had also 4 heads. Alexander the Great had 4 main generals. They worked with him through the entire of his conquest. And when he died, this is just history, when he died, the entire Grecian Empire was divided into 4 equal pieces by those 4 generals, and each general took a piece of the Grecian Empire. So the leopard then represents the Grecian Empire. And then Daniel says, and this is going to be the Roman Empire, but again, Daniel can't discern between Rome 2,000 years ago and the revised Roman Empire. He's just seeing this conglomeration, if you will. Daniel says, after this I saw in the night visions, and behold, the 4th beast, dreadful and terrible and strong exceedingly. And it had great iron teeth, and it devoured and brake in pieces and stamped the residue with the feet of it. And it was diverse from all the beasts that were before it, and it had 10 horns. So the first part of his description, he's talking about the Roman Empire, which was brutal beyond anything before it. During the time of the Roman Empire, you could walk into many cities, and there'd be a place in the city, and you'd see crosses erected where men or women had been crucified, because they did that as a sign, is that don't break Roman law, because this is the result of it. They were absolutely brutal. But Daniel concludes his vision of the 4th creature by saying it was diverse or different from the others before it, and he sees the 10 horns, meaning that within the Roman Empire he sees these 10 nations, these 10 horns, which represent 10 nations that would rise again during the time of the tribulation. So these are the beasts that Daniel saw. Again, he saw them 2,700 years prior to John being on the Isle of Patmos and given the vision of Revelation. So we go back to what John saw then. Verse 2 of chapter 13 of the book of Revelations, John says, and I saw a beast, and the beast which I saw was like unto a leopard. Remember, Daniel saw a leopard. And it had feet was like unto a bear. Daniel saw a bear. And its mouth was the mouth of a lion. Daniel saw a lion as well. And the dragon, who represents Satan, gave him his power and his seat and great authority. Meaning simply that Satan has been behind the scenes, moving nations in their attempts to subjugate Israel all the way down through the ages. You go all the way back to the book of Exodus. The Egyptian empire of that day, it was an evil, wicked empire. And if you will remember, Moses stood up to the Pharaoh of that day. He threw his rod upon the ground and it became a snake. The magicians of Egypt threw their rods on the ground, and it wasn't a parlor trick. Their rods became snakes, meaning that the powers of Satan were always operating behind these different empires, even as they operate behind many of the nations of the planet today. John goes on and says, and I saw one of the heads of this seven-headed beast. I saw one of his heads as it were wounded to death, and his deadly wound was healed, and all the world wondered after the beast. Now, you'll remember, and I said it last week, during the time of Alexander the Great, it is believed he had this angel, this fallen angel behind him that helped him to accomplish that which he accomplished so quickly. But upon the death of Alexander the Great, this angel, this troublemaking angel, was locked into the bottomless pit where he could make no more trouble. He could not do what he did for Alexander the Great. He could not do that again. He's in the bottomless pit. But if you go back to chapter 9 of the book of Revelations, it says a star fell from heaven, which was Satan, and unto him was given the key to the bottomless pit. He immediately unlocked the bottomless pit. And this fallen angel who had been locked there, had helped Alexander the Great, had been locked away for all this time. He's now loose again, and he gives his powers, he gives his backing to this man called Antichrist, the same way that he did to Alexander the Great. And the Antichrist attempts to do the same thing that Alexander. I want to subjugate and own the world. I want the whole world to be subject to me. It says, I saw one of the heads of, as it were wounded to death, meaning that this head of this empire, when this angel was put into the bottomless pit, it was like a wound. It was like being wounded unto death. It was taken out of commission. And his deadly wound was healed, meaning that he was allowed back out of the bottomless pit in Revelation chapter 9. And all the world wondered after the beast. Now, this term beast is a little bit tricky because it depends on when you say the beast, it's talking about the Antichrist. But right behind the Antichrist is a fallen angel who's also referred to as the beast. And the entire system, the political system and the military system, all of it also is referred to as the beast or the Antichrist system. So when we say the beast, you have to see more than just one object. It often means more than one thing. The world wondered after the beast. How could the Antichrist, first of all, how can he strike a peace treaty between the Arab nations or the Islamic nations and Israel? I mean, that's a superstar right there to do that, because president after president has tried to do it. And so immediately he's going to have the accolades of the world. The political world is going to fall in love with him as being a mastermind. And they worship the dragon. Let's go back and read this through. All the world wondered after the beast, and they worshiped the dragon, which gave power unto the beast, and they worshiped the beast, saying, who is like unto the beast? Who is able to make war with him? Now, look at the first phrase. It says, they worshiped the dragon. They didn't know they were worshiping the dragon, but they were giving their worship to this man called Antichrist. Well, behind him is the fallen angel, the beast, and behind him is Satan. It's just like when you get, little kids and they go get the Ouija board, or they light candles, and we're going to have a seance. And they turn the lights off and light the candles, and they're having a seance, and dear old grandmother shows up who passed away 10 years ago. And they've got questions they want to ask grandma. But that's not grandma. That's a demon from hell. And although they think they're talking to grandma, they don't realize you're talking to a demon spirit. And this is the same way people will be worshiping. Just like right now, people almost worship Beyonce, not realizing that right behind her is the powers of darkness. And most of the big singers, Rihanna and all of them, most of the big singers now, and you can tell that they're evil if you listen to what they sing. They are right now, they are demonizing the youth of the world. That's what they're doing. Nothing that they sing, nothing that they promote is light and righteousness. It's all dark. It's all wickedness to some point. Look at Hollywood. Hollywood is the same thing. People love their Hollywood movie stars, but they're inspired by the powers of darkness. Since I was a young man, what's been promoted out of Hollywood is violence. Shoot them. And now what's coming out of it, we are watching, my wife and I have been watching a program on Netflix. And it started out, we like science fiction, and it started out good. And we watched the first couple episodes saying, yeah, this is going to be good. Then all of a sudden I noticed it started changing. I seen women kissing women. Then I seen a woman with two men, and I'm like, baby, we can't watch this. This is wicked. They're trying to demonize the whole world and normalize evil acts. And that's what it's saying here. They worship the dragon, which gave power to the beast. They worship Satan, which gave power to the Antichrist. And they worshiped the Antichrist, the beast, which is the Antichrist, saying, who is like unto the beast? You know, he's going to be a man of military power, intellectual power, political power, and men love power. You know, when you look at the football greats or the basketball greats, we don't lift up the ones that can't play that good. We lift up the ones that can get on the field and make something happen. Men are gravitate towards something over and beyond what average and normal people can do. They said, who is like unto the beast and who is able to make war with him? And there was given unto him, unto the Antichrist, a mouth, speaking great things and blasphemies, and power was given unto him to continue 42 months. Now it says that it was given unto him a mouth, meaning that he will, because of his position, have a global voice, that when he speaks, it rings through the nations. It's almost like when the president of the United States, it kind of ricochets across the nations. But when this person speaks, it'll go across all the nations. Everybody will hear it. Not hear his actual voice, but we'll see it on the social feeds. We'll see it on the news. We'll see it in the airways. He'll be speaking great things and blasphemies, which lets you know he's not pro-God. He's not pro-Christ. He's Antichrist. When he first comes on the scene, he's going to seem like an eloquent politician, as most of them are. Well-spoken, mind like a steel trap. He can stay on point, conversation after conversation. But midway the tribulation, he's going to begin to show who he really is. His fangs come out. He's speaking great things and blasphemies. Right now in the political spectrum, conversation concerning religion is pretty much taboo. I mean, if it's Islam, it's pretty much, okay, you can say that, but if you're trying to promote Christianity or some other religion, it's almost, you can't go there. Well, this man will put religion front and center. Blasphemy is a religious term. He'll be speaking great things in blasphemy, and power was given unto him to continue doing so for 42 months. 42 months is 3.5 years. It is the latter 3.5 years of the 7-year tribulation in which his true colors are shown, and he will begin to allow himself to be seen as what he really is, and that is anti-God and anti-Christ. And he opened his mouth in blasphemy against God, to blaspheme his name and his tabernacle and them that dwell in heaven. which I believe means the church. The angelic host, yes, but I believe it also means the church. It also means the 144,000 Israelites, the man-child from chapter 12, I believe it is, that gave their, not chapter 12, is it chapter 10 maybe, that gave their hearts and lives to the Lord. And it was given unto him to make war with the saints. The term the saints refers to national Israel. And here's what you keep in mind. Revelation is not about the church. Revelation is about Israel. It's not about the United States. It's about Israel. And the powers of darkness have always hated Israel. But the Christian community is next one in line to be persecuted. Israel is hated because they're God's people. Christians are hated for the exact same reason. They're God's people. True Christianity. It was given to him to make war with the saints and to overcome them. God allows him to have victories over Israel. Israel has not lost a war or a skirmish. They took on all the Arab nations at once. Well, I think it's called the 3-day war. They put everybody down in 3 days. That's the kind of military prowess that they have unto this day. Several years ago, Iran was making they were making too much progress on their nuclear desires. And in one night, nobody knows what happened. 3 or 4 of their nuclear scientists died. There's no signs, no footprints, no way you could tell what happened. But they pretty much know Israel snuck in there and snuffed them out and slipped out. They're so elite that nobody even knew what happened. And power was given him, the Antichrist, over all kindreds and tongues and nations. Now it needs some qualification here. It says all kindreds, all tongues, and all nations. I believe, it is my belief that what it is talking about is all kindreds, tongues, and nations that are under his domain. And as a matter of fact, if you look at the red on the map, that is the footprint of the old Roman Empire. It's these nations that is where the Empire of Rome sat. Now, it is probable that, very probable that some of these same nations will be involved in the revived Roman Empire. As a matter of fact, now you'll see it goes all the way up to London, Spain, all the way up through there. The European Union is already beginning to assimilate some of these nations together. Now, it may not be called that. It may be called something else. But it's always these coalition of nations that come together to try to promote whatever their desire is. It will ultimately continue to grow until the Antichrist makes his debut and takes over some portion of them. I can't say for sure it's exactly these nations, but I can say that there's at least some of these nations will certainly be involved. Power was given him over all kindreds, tongues, and nations. And if I could paraphrase that, it's all kindreds, tongues, and nations that are under his domain, that are in the area of his immediate influence. And all that dwell upon the earth shall worship him. So now we see that there's an area of influence, but we also see that he impacts people all across the entirety of the globe. There will be people in every nation because it will be what's in vogue. Like right now, we have this president, very controversial president that we have in office in the United States. You can go to China. His influence is in China. His influence is in Europe. Everybody has an attitude or opinion about this president. It'll be much the same way with the Antichrist. Except that when they throw in their lot with him, they will stand with him even though they're in a different nation. Yeah, that's my guy. And all that dwell upon the earth shall worship him, whose names are not written in the book of the life of the Lamb, slain from the foundation of the earth. Here's my point. Intellectually, man is not strong enough. Politically, man is not strong enough. We don't have the acumen. We don't have the ability to resist what's coming except your name be written in the Lamb's book of life. We can only overcome through the blood of the Lamb and the word of our testimony. Just because you think you see it politically, that's not enough to withstand this. All that dwell upon the earth shall worship the Antichrist, whose names are not written in the book of the life of the Lamb from the foundation of the earth. Meaning that the Lamb slain is from the foundation of the earth. And those who have expressed and put their faith in them. If any man hath an ear, let him hear. And here's what you need to hear. This is a strong statement. All that dwell upon the earth shall worship the Antichrist, except their name be written in the book of life. It means that man's day of saying, well, I'm an atheist, that's over. As Billy Preston made a song many years ago, it said, you got to serve somebody. It may be the devil or it may be the Lord, but you got to serve somebody. And in this hour, the worship at the Antichrist, at least in his domain, it's not an option. It is a requirement. If you don't worship the Antichrist, we will kill you. Now, there's only one religion on the planet today that I know of that is strongly promoting that mindset. That if you're in one of those nations where that religion is prominent, you don't get a choice. It just by virtue of the fact that you live there means that you're a worshiper of that type. And if not, we're going to have to behead the infidel. I personally believe, and this is not scripture, that religion will explode and begin to morph into beast worship. Although it won't be called that, it'll be called something palatable, but in reality, it's beast worship. It's the worship of the beast. He says, if any man hath an ear, let him hear. It means that you're going to worship somebody. And choose you this day. Choose you this day whom you're going to serve. He that leadeth into captivity shall go into captivity, meaning all those that do not receive Jesus Christ and Lord and Savior ultimately will enter into captivity. He that killeth with the sword must be killed by the sword. Those who enlist to fight on behalf of the Antichrist armies will ultimately die by the sword. Here is the patience and the faith of the saints. Meaning that at this time, those who are saved on this planet, and the rapture has already happened. 144,000 have already been caught up. The two witnesses have already been caught up. But people every day as they're seeing this, they're like, I got to get right with God. And the Lord will still save them, but will not remove them from this planet. You're a little bit late on your decision. And so here's the patience and the faith of the saints is that you are going to perhaps have to go through something, but if you'll love not your life unto the death, if you'll hold on to the faith. John goes on and says, and I beheld another beast coming up out of the earth, and he had two horns like a lamb. He spake like a dragon. Now, we always hear about the Antichrist. These movies are made about the Antichrist. And he is the leader of this last day anti-Christian movement. But because worship is involved in the movement, there must be a religious leader to work with the Antichrist. And John says, I beheld him, I beheld another beast. He's a beast in that the powers of darkness are behind him. He's coming up out of the earth. It means that he comes up from the ranks of humanity. And he had two horns like a lamb. Meaning that he presents himself as a religious authority. But he spake as a dragon, meaning that what he said was inspired by Satan. It's one thing when you have a wolf in sheep's clothing. It's another thing when you have a straight up devil in sheep's clothing. I meant to say a wolf in sheep's clothing, but when you have a dragon in sheep's clothing, it gets even worse. So he says that he had two horns like a lamb, showing himself to be pious and to be a religious figure. But he spake like a dragon, meaning that his words are inspired of hell. And it's all in blasphemy of the true and the living God, because his job is to bring all worship away from the God of glory and to put the worship upon the Antichrist, which the fallen angel is receiving it right behind the Antichrist, which Satan is right behind the fallen angel, ultimately receiving all of that worship. And the scripture we just read, the whole world will worship him. And he exercised, this is the second one, he's called the false prophet. That's who he's referred to as, the false prophet, not a false prophet, the false prophet. There's not been a false prophet like this one. And he exercised all the power of the first beast, which was the Antichrist before him, and he caused the earth and them which dwell therein to worship the first beast. He caused the earth and them to dwell therein to worship the man called Antichrist. Or at least that's what the earth, those who worship him, they'll see the Antichrist with their natural eyes. They won't see the fallen angel behind them or Satan standing in the rears. He caused the earth and them that dwell therein to worship the first beast. Now they think they're worshiping the Antichrist, but this fallen angel whose deadly wound was healed, that's the one helping the Antichrist. And he doeth great wonders, this false prophet. He doeth great wonders so that he maketh fire come down from heaven on the earth in the sight of men. Now, I've heard people explain the scripture by saying, well, it's going to be a coordinated effort. There's a satellite that's going to shoot a laser beam, and it'll just hit right wherever they've pre-orchestrated it to hit to make it seem like a miracle. The problem with that theory is that this word wonders in the Greek is miracle. It means it's not a parlor trick. It's not a trick of science. And I take you all the way back. I just mentioned it to Egypt. When Moses threw down his rod, it turned into a snake. That was real. And when the magicians threw down their rods and they turned into snake, that was also real. Never think that the powers of darkness are just parlor tricks. A lot of it is parlor tricks, but there's a real devil. And he'll really manifest himself. And he'll really pull you straight down into hell. He doeth great wonders so that he maketh fire come down from heaven on the earth in the sight of men. And he deceiveth them that dwell on the earth by the means of those miracles which he hath power to do in the sight of the beast. Saying to them that dwell on the earth, that they should make an image to the beast, which hath the wound by the sword and did live. Now again, we got to keep the language straight. From the perspective of people on the earth that day, they're making an image to the man called Antichrist. But the spiritual reality is the image is being made to the fallen angel behind the Antichrist. This fallen angel is just like a puppeteer. He's like a master puppeteer. He's moving the Antichrist because he's in the natural realm and people will relate to him. They don't know they're worshiping the devil. They don't know they're worshiping a fallen angel or Satan. They think it's this man called Antichrist. And so he says to the people of the earth that they should make an image to the beast, which had the wound by the sword and did live. That speaks of this fallen angel. Now, I do want to look at Daniel chapter 12. If you could turn there, please. Yes, Daniel chapter 12. Because Daniel prophesied concerning this. And let's see, chapter 12, that's well over 2,000 years ago. That's still over 2,500 years ago. But Daniel prophesied in chapter 12, verse 11, concerning this 7-year period called tribulation. And he says, and from the time that the daily sacrifice shall be taken away, and the abomination that maketh desolate set up, there shall be 1,290 days. Now, 1,290 days is exactly 3.5 years. And the idea here is that when Israel, that the peace treaty is cut, the Antichrist makes the peace treaty, that begins a 7-year tribulation period. The first 3.5 years are fairly peaceful, during which time Israel has the Temple Mount back. They rebuild their temple. They bring the brazen altar out. They put the Ark of the Covenant back in the holy place. They bring all the accoutrements back, and they begin to offer up the morning oblation at 9 a.m. and the evening sacrifice at 3 p.m. They begin to do it again, but midway the tribulation, when the Antichrist begins to show his true colors, he says, no, stop this. He goes into the holy place in the temple that they rebuilt. He takes the ark with the mercy seat over it and the cherubim looking at each other, and he moves it out of the way, and he sets a statue of himself there. The abomination that maketh desolate. Stand in the holy place. Jesus, I believe it was, he told the Jews of that day, he said, when you see this, flee to the mountains. Meaning there's a place in Petra in Jordan. Flee to the place that was made for you, that was prepared for you. And from the time of the daily sacrifice shall be taken away the abomination that maketh desolate set up. There shall be 1,290 days. 3.5 years. Revelation 13:15 says, and speaking of the false prophet, and he had power to give life unto the image of the beast. Now, saints, this is not a parlor trick. The word life in the Greek, it means spirit or breath. It's pneuma. He somehow causes this statue or whatever that it is to actually gain animation. He had power to give life unto the image of the beast, so that the image of the beast should both speak and cause as many as would not worship the image of the beast should be killed. Now, to us Western-minded people, we're democratic in our mindset. It would be ridiculous. This sounds very ridiculous. But if you go to the other side, those nations in and around Israel, not Israel itself, but those nations, the Arab nations around Israel, and even the Persian nation of Iran, they are totalitarian nations. And many times the leader of that nation, you walk in, they've got pictures of him. He's basically worshiped, because Islam is not just a political system, it is a religious system. The Antichrist system will not just be a political system, it will also have inside of it a religious aspect. And because of that religious aspect, those who do not worship the beast, they must be eliminated. That sounds strange to us, but go to Saudi Arabia and say Jesus Christ. And you'll find out right today that's happening on the planet right today. Now, let me give a disclaimer here. I cannot say with certainty that Islam will morph into beast worship. But I'm saying that there are many markers that say it's a strong possibility. Is that okay? As many as would not worship the image of the beast should be killed. And he, the false prophet, who's working with the Antichrist, and he causes all, both small and great, rich and poor, free and bound, to receive a mark in their right hand or in their foreheads, and that no man might buy or sell, save he had the mark or the name of the beast or the number of the name. Meaning that this is not global, it's my understanding. This is not a global, but it is definitely within, it's universal within the area that he has immediate impact in. The revised Roman Empire, that 10 nations that are under his domain, it's an absolute there. It will have tentacles that go out across the world. There'll be nations all over the place. You know, men follow men. When I was growing up, and I'm not beating anybody up, please, I'm just giving an example. I'm not criticizing anybody. When I was a young man, a young boy, nobody had tattoos. You never even saw one. And if someone saw one, it was very unique. It was like, what? How'd they do that? But suddenly, tattooing became a style. It became in vogue. So now people have full sleeves. They have full body art all across the entirety of their body. So just like men follow men in that respect, there was a time everybody didn't have pierced ears or pierced noses or pierced whatever that it was. Now piercings are everything because it's become a style. So when this begins to happen, the mark of the beast, some people would not be under the dominion for it to be forced upon them, but they're like, no, this is a style, man. I'm going to do it. I just feel like I need to throw this in. Again, I'm not beating anybody up, but did you know that there was a scripture that says, thou shalt not put any marks on your body? If you've already done it, you can't undo it. Just repent and don't do it no more. Amen. Not beating anybody up. So they receive a mark on their right hand or their foreheads. Now, here's why it's the right hand or the forehead. Most people are right-handed. Your forehead is very visible. If anyone sees you, they see your forehead. If you're doing anything active-wise, they're going to see your right hand, meaning that it's a very, very visible, open public proclamation of a person's allegiance to the beast. And incidentally, you don't take the mark of the beast by accident. You know, for years people say, well, it's your Visa card. The Visa card is the beast. No, it's not. This is a statement of allegiance to the Antichrist. It's something that you do not mistakenly. You do full well knowing what you're doing and voluntarily doing what you're doing, that I give myself to the Antichrist. When there was slaves in the olden days of the Old Testament, they would take them to a tree and they would put a hole through their ear. And that hole symbolized that I belong to my master. It was a mark. It was a visible mark. Well, the Antichrist is putting a visible mark on his people as in the days of old, saying, this is mine. And ultimately, they will ultimately be his. And when he is cast into the lake of fire, those that are his will also be cast into the lake of fire. That no man might buy or sell, say that he had the mark or the name of the beast or the number of his name. Here's wisdom. Let him that hath understanding count the number of the beast, for it is the number of a man. And his number is 666. And we all know that that's 666. And what does it mean? Adam was created on the sixth day. The number of man is 6, because the number 3 represents the completion. It represents not perfection, but completion. 3 6s represent the completion of man's fall. He's not just fallen away from God that he's hiding behind the trees of the forest, but he's fallen away to the extent that he's worshiping another man. Now, we many times, even now, we see things happening in our society. This is how people are. 666, yeah, put mine over here on the side. Have you ever seen your singers, many of them? You'll see them in TMZ or in the magazines, or you'll see them on memes, and they throw up the sign. You ever seen that? That's 3 6s. 6, 6, 6. It's already happening. People have already accepted the mindset. You'll see this all the time. And for the young people, you need to know what you're throwing up. Before you throw up anything, you need to research it and know what you're doing. They had many years ago, I forget the brother's name, he's in Fort Worth. He's got a church in Fort Worth, but he's got some excellent videos. They would make the CD case, and it was some kind of what was the name of those guys? Dead Thug Bones. Or, I can't think of the name of them. Anyway, on the back of the CD, they had a witchcraft spell written there, but it was written backwards and in reverse. And you had to hold it up in a mirror to read it. And when you read it, you read the spell out loud. You read it, you actually read the spell, and it's supposed to cast a witchcraft spell. So before you get involved in things, know what you're doing. And I can just tell you now, if it has anything to do with Hollywood, if it has anything to do with the music industry, it's evil. There's no righteousness coming out of this. It's even crept into Christian music. You better make sure when you're listening to Christian music, here's what Christian music is. It's not just a nice beat and a nice voice. If God is not the center of the worship of the lyrics of that song, it's not Christian. Because many times what they've done is they couldn't make enough money doing Christian music, so they made crossover music. It means you sing it, and if you're a Christian, the lyrics sound like you're expressing love to God. But if you're not a Christian, it sounds like you're expressing love to your girl or your boy. It's crossover. They did it to expand the money that they can make. But real Christian music is not crossover. Real Christian music says Jesus. And it has a heart. I love you, and I praise you, and I adore you. And we have much in the Christian community now that's not that. Okay, so I've gotten off my Bible class a little bit here. For it is the number of a man, and his number is 666, meaning it is the completion of the fall of man. It is when God's wrath unfolds, when it runs over, the cup of his indignation is filled. Chapter 14. Now, chapter 14, again, is going to begin talking about the 144,000. And as I told you early in this series, Revelation is not laid out on a linear timeline. It will go for a piece and it'll fold back and give greater explanation. And what many times happens, like we saw the 6 seals, it gave this broad outline of what the tribulation was. And then we came back and we looked at the 7 trumpets, and it began to color that in with more detail. And so we've already looked at the 144,000. We know that they are converted Jews from 12,000 from each of the 12 tribes. Well, chapter 14 is going to paint into a little more details concerning this 144,000. But because we're at a chapter break, and I've already put a lot out, I don't want us to just walk out just overloaded. I want us to have enough that we can kind of absorb some of the things. And let me say this. You're not going to remember everything that I said. We will put the video up on our sermon archives on the webcast. You can go back and study it later, but you won't remember everything, but you've been exposed to it. So now the next time you work through that book, you have a better foundation, and each subsequent time you go through it, pieces begin to come together. The book of Daniel is very closely aligned with the book of Revelation. And let me say one more thing. I'm going to close. Daniel saw his vision of the different animals that we looked at tonight. But Nebuchadnezzar was given a dream of a statue, the head of gold. I think the chest of, I don't know what it was, silver or something, the legs of iron and the feet of iron mixed with clay. It is the same 7 nations that we're talking about now. Nebuchadnezzar had a dream. Daniel told him what it was. Daniel had dreams. The book of Daniel just fits in perfectly with the book of Revelation. So in your study, you may look at some of that as well. So we're going to close for the evening. My brother, could you go ahead and...
Thank you for watching, and please subscribe. You can also find more of our videos in our archives at christunveiled.org. We'll see you next time.